In the far reaches of the galaxy there were stories older than any empire. These were not written in one language nor carried by one people, but whispered across 1,000 different worlds. Some said the stories were myths. Others said they were warnings. And still others believed they were only bedtime tales told to young cadets who dreamed of heroism. The story was always about the same species, humanity. To the current galaxy, humanity was something almost forgotten. The Great Alliances, the Union of Stars, the Dawn Accord, the Keepers of Order, had never seen a human in living memory. Not one. Yet the stories remained, told like echoes from an ancient past. They said humans were reckless. They said humans were fragile, weak in body compared to the tall, armored races of the core worlds. They said humans had burned their own planet, fought their own wars until nothing was left. And still, despite all of this, humans were said to win battles they should never have survived. The young cadets of the Dawn Accord laughed when their instructors mentioned these old stories. A weak race like that could never stand against the Dominion, they said. It is impossible. To them, the tales were like the stories of old gods, dramatic but not real. But among the oldest veterans, there was hesitation in their laughter. Some had studied old star maps where Earth was once marked. Some had read the fragments of history where humans were mentioned in passing. A mercenary general once told his soldiers, "If humanity still walks the stars, then the Dominion should fear." No one believed him. The Dominion did not fear anyone. The Dominion was the most powerful empire the galaxy had seen in millennia. They were not born in peace. Their empire was built through war, one conquest at a time. Every world they touched either bent its knee or burned. They were patient, they were ruthless, and they were efficient. Their fleets were endless. Their weapons were unmatched. When the Dominion moved into the outer sectors, panic spread. Small colonies vanished in days. Great planetary defenses that had held for centuries collapsed in hours. Even when the alliances of the galaxy united, they found themselves retreating again and again. No one could stop the Dominion. No one dared. But then on the eve of another terrible loss, a whisper spread across the galaxy. At first it came from scouts near the fringe worlds. At first it sounded like another rumor, another myth, another false hope. A fleet had appeared. Not an ordinary fleet, not Dominion, not the fractured ships of the free worlds. These ships bore markings that had not been seen in living memory. Simple designs, scarred hulls, engines older than the latest galactic models by centuries. They were crude, but unmistakable. The ships bore the insignia of Earth. The scouts tried to explain to their commanders, but the commanders laughed. Earth was a forgotten rock, they said. The humans were extinct. These must be raiders using old symbols, nothing more. But the reports did not stop. More scouts confirmed the same thing. More ships sighted the same fleet. And then, against every expectation, those ships entered the battlefield. The first encounter was on the broken edge of the rim, at a world named Caravel. The Dominion had nearly finished its work there. Their massive carriers orbited high above the burning cities, and their soldiers marched across the ground without resistance. The free colonies had already abandoned hope. That was when the humans arrived. At first, no one believed what they were seeing. The human fleet emerged from slipspace not in cautious formation, but in a wild, chaotic spread. Their ships were patched, some barely holding together. Their weapons looked old, even laughable compared to Dominion technology. And yet, they did not hesitate. The humans attacked. The Dominion expected them to retreat. No one in the galaxy fought the Dominion head-on. It was foolish. It was suicide. But the humans charged forward like they had been waiting for this moment all their lives. They weaved between the massive carriers, diving straight into the heart of enemy fire. They did not fight to survive, they fought to win. For the first time in years, Dominion ships were destroyed in battle. The free worlds listened in disbelief as transmissions carried across the stars. Reports told of humans boarding Dominion cruisers, humans using damaged ships as weapons, humans refusing to retreat even when outnumbered 10 to 1. The galaxy had no word for this kind of fighting. The only word they found was the old one: human. Across the Union of Stars, across the Dawn Accord, across every council and command, debates broke out. Some leaders claimed this was a trick. Others argued these were mercenaries pretending to be something more. But the soldiers, the ones fighting at the front, knew better. The stories were true. Humanity was not extinct. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had been waiting. Where they had been all this time, no one knew. How they had survived when history said they destroyed themselves, no one could explain. But they had returned, and their return was not quiet. On Caravel, after the battle ended, survivors reported something strange. The humans did not raise flags, did not claim glory, did not even stay to be thanked. They repaired their ships as quickly as they could and vanished back into slipspace. But before leaving, one human captain spoke a single message on all channels. His voice was old, rough, like someone who had seen more battles than any soldier alive. He said, "We were once only a story. Remember us now." The galaxy remembered. Aunt. World still free. Children repeated those words to each other. On military ships, soldiers whispered them before heading into battle. On Dominion worlds, governors reported nervousness among their troops. The invincible empire, for the first time in centuries, had seen an enemy charge directly at its heart and win. The myth was no longer a myth. Humanity had stepped onto the battlefield, and everything was about to change. The galaxy did not sleep after Caravel. Reports spread faster than light, racing through every channel, every alliance, every whisper network. Humanity had returned. At first, governments tried to silence the rumors. The Dawn Accord sent out an official statement calling it false hope. The Union of Stars declared the reports enemy misinformation. Even the keepers of order, who prided themselves on holding ancient records, claimed the humans were long extinct. But the soldiers at the front knew the truth. They had seen the Dominion retreat for the first time in years. And at the center of that retreat stood a fleet bearing the insignia of Earth. The Dominion did not take long to respond. Their commanders were furious. For them, humans were not myths. In their archives, deep within forbidden vaults, they kept fragments of history. They remembered the last war humanity had fought, long before the Dominion's empire had risen to its height. The records were incomplete, but the conclusion was clear. Humanity had been dangerous. That could not be allowed again. The Dominion sent reinforcements to the Rim. Not small patrols, not scouts, but an entire armada. If the humans wanted to step onto the battlefield, the Dominion would crush them so completely that no one would ever whisper their name again. But the humans did not run. They chose their next battlefield with care. It was a place called Dayaris, a mining world rich in ores but poor in defenses. The Dominion expected to seize it within a day. Instead, when their fleet arrived, the humans were already there, waiting. The sight of the human fleet made even experienced Dominion commanders pause. The ships were unlike any other in the galaxy. They were old, patched and ugly compared to the sleek designs of the Dominion. Some looked like they had been rebuilt 100 times, with metal plates layered over scars. Yet they flew in formation with a discipline that was chilling. The humans did not wait for the Dominion to fire first. They attacked. The first waves were chaotic. Human frigates darted forward, weaving between Dominion cruisers, unleashing volleys of missiles that seemed primitive. The Dominion laughed at first. Their shields absorbed the impacts. Their gunners targeted the fragile-looking ships. Yet every time a human vessel was struck, it did not fall back. Instead, it pressed closer. It was not until the Dominion carriers began to explode that the laughter stopped. The humans had adapted. Their weapons were not stronger, but they had found weak points. Every strike, every maneuver had been deliberate. Where other species might rely on superior firepower, the humans relied on instinct and experience. They fought like soldiers, who had lost everything before and would never lose again. On the surface of Dayaris, miners and colonists watched from below as the impossible unfolded. They had prepared for death, for fire to fall from the sky. Instead, they saw the Dominion retreating, chased by humans who refused to yield. One miner, an old alien with scales faded from age, whispered, "The story is true." For the galaxy, the questions grew louder. Who were these humans now? Where had they been hiding all this time? And why had they returned only now, when the Dominion was strongest? The answers began to trickle in from survivors and intercepted transmissions. The humans had not vanished completely from history. They had gone silent, hiding in the shadows of the galaxy, surviving on scattered colonies and forgotten worlds. They had no empire, no grand alliance, no powerful fleets. But they had endured, and in their endurance, they had learned. They had turned survival into art. For centuries, while the galaxy grew complacent under the Dominion's shadow, humanity had prepared. They had fought among themselves, against starvation, against extinction. Every hardship had been a lesson. Every loss had become fuel for the fire that now burned in their return. Allied commanders began to study the humans with caution. At first, they thought humanity's victories were luck, but then came a series of battles that erased doubt on air. The ice fields of Relvar, humans turned a trap into an ambush, destroying twice their number. On the void stations of Drosk, they fought hand-to-hand inside Dominion halls, turning captured weapons against their enemies. On the asteroid belt of Mir, they lured an entire Dominion fleet into a minefield they had built from nothing but scrap. Each time, the humans survived. Each time, the Dominion lost ground. What unnerved the galaxy most was not their victories, but their attitude. Humans did not seem afraid of death. To them, sacrifice was not defeat, but part of the plan. They used crippled ships as rams. They detonated reactors while still inside enemy formations. They threw themselves at impossible odds and somehow turned those odds in their favor. The galaxy began to understand why the old stories always spoke of human courage. At the heart of these battles was one man, Captain Elias Ward. His name spread across channels as quickly as the legend of his people. Ward was not young. His face was lined with scars, his hair marked by silver. But when he spoke, entire fleets listened. His message was simple. We do not fight for glory. We fight because the galaxy cannot afford to kneel. For the free worlds, his words were fire. For the Dominion, they were poison. The Dominion launched campaign after campaign to destroy Ward's fleet, but every attempt ended the same way, with Dominion losses and human survival. The more they fought, the more they realized their greatest enemy was not human weapons but human unpredictability. No Dominion strategist could predict what a human would do next. They did not follow rules of logic or tradition. They improvised, they adapted, and they turned chaos into strength. In council chambers across the galaxy, debates raged. Some leaders argued that humanity was dangerous, that they should not be trusted. Others argued that without them, the Dominion would never be stopped. And in the middle of those arguments, ordinary soldiers and colonists made up their minds. They would follow the humans. On Dayaris, when the smoke cleared, the colonists stood outside their ruined cities and looked to the stars. For the first time in years, they felt hope. Children pointed at the patched human ships and cheered. Veterans saluted. Elders wept quietly, because they all understood something important. The galaxy had many armies. The galaxy had many fleets, but only the humans had come back from legend to fight. Only the humans had proven that stories could become reality again. And with every battle they fought, humanity reminded the galaxy of a simple truth. They were not myths. They were warriors. And they had only just begun. The galaxy had seen many wars before. Entire civilizations had risen and fallen. Empires had stretched across the stars, only to collapse under their own weight. Yet never before had the galaxy seen a species fight the way humanity fought. Other races depended on their technology, their superior numbers, or the safety of tradition. The Dominion relied on overwhelming force, confident that size and power could not be challenged. But the humans were different. They had no empire, no advanced technology compared to their enemies. What they had instead was something the galaxy did not understand: instinct, courage, and the ability to turn even chaos into strategy. For the first time, commanders across the free worlds began studying humans not as myths, but as teachers. The lesson of Relvar was a frozen planet. Its surface nothing but endless ice fields and howling winds. The Dominion had cornered a small human force there, cutting off all escape. By the logic of war, the humans were finished. But humans did not follow logic. As the Dominion advanced, the humans lured them deeper onto the ice, retreating step by step. Dominion walkers crushed forward, their heavy armor weighing them down. The humans placed no defenses, no walls. They left only trails and false positions. When the Dominion was certain of victory, the ground beneath them shattered. The humans had studied the ice, mapping its cracks and weaknesses. With explosives placed in key points, they had turned the battlefield itself into a weapon. Entire regiments of Dominion troops fell into the frozen sea. The survivors who managed to escape spoke of a terrifying sight: human soldiers charging over the ice, firing as they ran, faces set with determination instead of fear. Relvar became the first lesson. Humans used the environment as part of their war. To them, a battlefield was never just a place. It was a weapon waiting to be shaped. The fire of Drosk. The next lesson came on the void stations of Drosk. Dominion troops had seized the massive structure, turning it into a fortress. The station's defenses made it impossible for any fleet to break through. The humans did not attack from outside. They boarded. With ships barely holding together, they slammed into the station, cutting their way inside. What followed was not the clean, controlled warfare the galaxy was used to. It was close, brutal, and fast. Humans fought hand-to-hand using captured weapons, scraps of metal, anything they could find. To other races, it looked reckless. To the humans, it was survival. They moved through the halls in teams, covering each other, never leaving a comrade behind. Even when outnumbered, they fought with a unity that Dominion soldiers could not match. When the battle was over, the humans had not only taken the station, they had turned Dominion weapons against their own fleets, destroying the blockade in a single strike. The galaxy learned the second lesson. Humans adapted. They did not wait for perfect conditions or perfect tools. They made do with whatever they had, and in their hands even scraps became deadly. The trap at Mir, the asteroid belt of Mir, was a graveyard of ships, both old and new. For decades, no fleet had dared to fight there. The asteroids shifted constantly, colliding with each other, breaking apart, reforming. It was chaos. The Dominion believed no one could fight in such a place. The humans chose it as their battlefield. When the Dominion fleet pursued them, the humans lured them into the belt. There, hidden among the rocks, the humans had planted mines. Not standard mines, but improvised explosives built from scavenged parts. When the Dominion pressed forward, the asteroids themselves exploded, shattering into deadly fragments. Amid the confusion, the humans attacked from every direction, their smaller ships weaving between the debris as if the chaos was their home. By the end of the battle, the Dominion fleet was in ruins. The third lesson was clear: humans thrived in disorder. Where other species faltered in confusion, humans grew stronger. To them, chaos was not a threat. It was opportunity. The mystery of their spirit. All these victories forced the galaxy to ask one question: why? Why did humans fight this way? Why did they risk everything when others would retreat? Why did they throw themselves into battles they could not possibly win? The answer was not in their weapons, but in their spirit. Humans had lived on a world filled with storms, earthquakes, and endless conflict. They had survived hunger, plague, and wars against themselves. They had faced extinction more than once, yet every time they found a way forward. Where other species valued caution above all, humans had learned that risk was sometimes the only path to survival. They fought not because they believed they would always win, but because they believed surrender was worse than death. This spirit spread like fire. Soldiers from other worlds began to fight alongside humans, inspired by their courage. Colonists whispered their names with respect. Even old generals who had once dismissed them now studied their battles with awe. The Dominion, however, grew more fearful. They realized that humanity could not be broken by fear, because humans had already lived with fear for centuries. Captain Elias Ward. At the heart of this rising storm stood Captain Elias Ward. Ward was not the strongest or the fastest. He was not a legend of perfect victories. He was a man who had seen defeat and chosen to rise again. His fleet was small, but his voice carried across the stars. He told his soldiers, "We fight not because we are ready, but because no one else will. If we wait for perfect strength, the galaxy will already be lost." Those words became the motto of every soldier who followed humanity. The Dominion labeled him a criminal, a terrorist, an enemy of order. But to the free worlds, he was a symbol. And to the humans, he was proof that their story was not finished. New fear. The Dominion launched greater campaigns, sending their most advanced fleets against humanity. But every time the result was the same. The humans adapted, they improvised, they turned defeat into ambush, retreat into trap, and loss into victory. The galaxy began to whisper a new truth. The Dominion could win 1,000 battles, but if humanity stood in even one, the war could still turn. That fear spread deeper than any weapon. Dominion soldiers, once proud and unshaken, now hesitated when they heard humans were near. Entire garrisons faltered when they believed human ships were coming. The myth of humanity had become real again, and the Dominion could not erase it. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy looked at the battlefield and saw hope. And at the center of that hope was not an empire, not a great alliance, but a species once thought extinct: humanity. The way they fought was more than strategy. It was survival turned into art. It was courage made into fire, and it was only the beginning. Every world in the galaxy could feel the shadow of the Dominion stretching wider and darker. Planet after planet had fallen. Even with humanity's sudden return, the battles were brutal. Victories came at great cost, and the Dominion still held the advantage of numbers and resources. Humanity had inspired the galaxy, but inspiration alone could not stop the endless tide. Then the Dominion revealed their greatest weapon. It was called the World Eater. No one knew its true name, only the devastation it left behind. The World Eater was not just a ship. It was a floating fortress the size of a small moon. Its engines could pull entire fleets into its range, and its main weapon could strip the life from a planet in minutes. Entire civilizations had already vanished under its shadow. The Dominion believed this weapon would crush hope forever. If the humans inspired rebellion, the World Eater would erase that inspiration with one terrible strike. When news spread that the World Eater was moving toward the free world of Kalor, panic erupted. Kalor was more than a planet. It was a symbol. It held one of the last great free councils, a place where dozens of species gathered to plan resistance. If Kalor fell, the galaxy would lose its center of unity. The Dominion knew this. That was why they sent the World Eater there. The human plan, most commanders believed Kalor was lost before the battle even began. No fleet had ever stood against the World Eater and survived. But humanity did not see the same way. Captain Elias Ward called a council aboard his flagship. Around the table sat representatives of different races: old warriors, young captains, and desperate leaders who had nowhere else to turn. Ward looked at each of them and spoke calmly. "We cannot outrun it, we cannot outgun it, but we can end it." The room fell silent. End it? The idea was madness. Yet madness was the kind of plan that belonged to humans. Ward explained the strategy. The human fleet would launch a direct assault, drawing the Dominion's attention. While the World Eater focused on them, a small strike team would infiltrate the fortress. Their mission: disable the weapon core from the inside. It was not a mission meant to return. The council argued. Some called it suicide. Others called it reckless. But the humans did not flinch. For them, risk was a language they understood better than anyone else. Ward's voice carried through the council chamber. We were once only a story. If we fall, today let us fall writing the next chapter. The room fell quiet. At last, one by one, the leaders agreed. Humanity would lead the charge. The battle begins. The day the World Eater arrived over Kalor, the sky turned black. The fortress blotted out the stars, its engines roaring like thunder. Dominion fleets surrounded it, confident in their invincibility. Then, the humans arrived. Their ships came out of slipspace in scattered waves, battered and scarred but unafraid. They did not form perfect lines or cautious formations. They charged straight into the Dominion blockade. The sky became fire. Human frigates darted between Dominion cruisers, their smaller size turning into an advantage. Old missile bays spat fire. Gunships rammed into carriers, detonating in bursts of light. Every move screamed defiance. On the ground, the people of Kalor looked up and saw something they had not seen in generations. The Dominion retreating step by step, but the humans knew it was only a distraction. The true battle was not outside. It was inside the World Eater. The infiltration ward himself led the strike team. Alongside him were soldiers from different species, aliens who had fought beside humanity and chosen to follow them into danger. They entered the fortress through a battered shuttle, slipping past the chaos of the space battle. The halls of the World Eater were vast and cold, filled with endless Dominion guards. The team moved like shadows, using every scrap of training, every ounce of instinct. Humans improvised with what they had, turning enemy weapons against their owners, laying traps from broken parts. Their allies followed their lead, inspired by their fearlessness. As they fought deeper, the sound of battle above shook the fortress. Ward knew every minute mattered. The human fleet could not last forever. Finally, they reached the core. It was a massive chamber glowing with energy that pulsed like the heart of a star. Around it stood layers of Dominion defenses. Ward turned to his team. His voice was steady. This is where the story holds. This is where we make it real. The sacrifice, the key. Team launched their attack. The fighting was brutal. One by one, soldiers fell, but they did not stop. They pushed forward, step by step, until they reached the core. Ward himself planted the charges. The Dominion forces closed in around them, thousands against a handful. There was no escape. But escape had never been part of the plan. Ward activated the detonator and sent one final message across the Allied channels. His words were simple. We were once only a story. Today, we are truth. The charges exploded. The fall of the World Eater above Kalor. The sky turned to fire once more. The World Eater shuddered, its weapon core unraveling. A chain of explosions ripped through the fortress, tearing it apart from the inside. The Dominion fleets panicked. Their greatest weapon, their symbol of terror, was crumbling before their eyes. They tried to retreat, but the humans pressed forward, driving them into the chaos of the explosion. When the light cleared, the World Eater was gone. Only debris drifted across the stars. Kalor still stood. The galaxy erupted in celebration. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had lost not just a battle, but their pride. Their weapon of fear was destroyed by the very species they had tried to erase from history. The aftermath on Kalor, survivors cheered and wept. Children painted the human insignia on walls. Soldiers saluted the sky. Leaders of the free world sent out messages of unity. The humans had done what no one else had dared. They had faced the impossible and won. Yet the cost was heavy. Captain Elias Ward and his strike team did not return. Their sacrifice became legend in that very moment. But humanity did not grieve in silence. To them, sacrifice was not the end of the story. It was the reason the story continued. Ward's name spread across the galaxy, carried in songs, whispered in barracks, and remembered in every council hall. The galaxy learned another lesson. Humans did not fight to survive. They fought so that others could survive. And with the fall of the World Eater, the war had turned. The Dominion, once untouchable, was now vulnerable. The free worlds rallied together. Fleets that had once hidden in fear now rose in defiance. And at the center of it all stood humanity. Not a myth, not a memory, but a people who had written their story in fire. The fall of the World Eater shook the galaxy like thunder. For generations, the Dominion had ruled through fear. No one dared to rise against them because their power seemed endless. But now, that illusion was broken. A single species, once thought to be only a story, had faced their greatest weapon and destroyed it. Every world felt the change. On Kalor, bells rang for days. Colonists who had prepared for death instead celebrated survival. Children painted human symbols on their shelters. Soldiers whispered the name of Captain Elias Ward as if it were a prayer. Across the free worlds, transmissions carried the same words again and again. We were once only a story. Today, we are truth. The galaxy had witnessed something greater than victory. It had witnessed the return of humanity. The Dominion falters. In the halls of the Dominion, panic spread. Commanders who had once spoken with arrogance now whispered in fear. The loss of the World Eater was more than military, it was psychological. Their soldiers had believed the fortress to be invincible. Now that it was gone, cracks appeared in the once solid walls of loyalty. Reports began to surface of Dominion, troops refusing to march into battles where humans were present. Entire garrisons faltered at rumors of human fleets. Fear had turned, and for the first time, it was the Dominion that trembled. But the Dominion was not defeated. Their fleets were still vast, their armies countless. They swore vengeance. They promised to crush the humans and burn every world that stood with them. The war was far from over, yet humanity had already changed the balance. The rising of the free worlds before humanity's return, the free worlds had fought like scattered fires. Each battle was isolated, each defense doomed to fail eventually. But now the fires had joined together. The Union of Stars, once hesitant to fight, pledged entire fleets to the cause. The Dawn Accord, known for its caution, sent their fastest ships to join the humans. Even smaller races, those who had only lived under the shadow of oppression, rose up with whatever ships or weapons they could find. The humans had not simply fought. They had reminded the galaxy how to fight. Where once the Dominion had faced broken resistance, they now faced a united front. And at the heart of this unity stood humanity, guiding, inspiring, and charging forward without fear. The human way spreads. The galaxy began to copy the human style of war. Commanders studied their battles, learning to adapt quickly, to improvise when plans failed, to see opportunity in disaster. Soldiers began to fight with the same fierce determination, refusing to retreat even when outnumbered. The phrase, "fight like a human," became a saying in barracks across the stars. To fight like a human meant to fight without surrender. It meant to fight as if survival depended not on strength but on courage. The humans themselves did not claim leadership or glory. Their fleets remained small, their ships still patched and scarred. But wherever they went, victory followed. Not because they were invincible, but because they refused to believe in the idea of defeat. The legacy of Elias Ward even. In victory, humanity carried the memory of sacrifice. Captain Elias Ward and his team had given their lives inside the World Eater. His final words had spread across the stars, carried into every battle, every council, every heart. Ward became more than a man. He became a symbol. Statues of him were built on Kalor, Relvar, and even on worlds he had never seen. Children learned his words before they learned the names of their own leaders. But among the humans there was no worship, only respect. They remembered Ward not as a perfect hero, but as one of their own. He had been a man who faced impossible odds and refused to step back. To them, that was what it meant to be human. And in carrying his spirit forward, every human became part of his legacy. The Dominion retreat. The war stretched on, but the momentum had changed. The Dominion could no longer move freely. Every advance met resistance. Every battle risked loss. Where once they had been predators, now they found themselves hunted. The humans did not win every fight. They suffered defeats, they lost ships, and many of their soldiers gave their lives. But every time they fell, they rose again. Every loss became fuel for greater determination. The Dominion learned a terrible truth. You could break human bodies, but you could not break the human spirit. And slowly, step by step, the Dominion began to retreat. The new legend. The galaxy no longer spoke of humanity as a myth. They were no longer a bedtime story or a half-remembered tale. They were reality, alive and fierce, and they had changed the course of history. On worlds far and near, people began to tell a new story. It was no longer, there was once a species called human. It was, the humans are here, they fight with us. They fight for us. They fight because they refuse to let us fall. The story grew stronger with every passing day. Where once myths were told in whispers, now songs were sung loudly. Humanity had stepped onto the battlefield, and the galaxy would never forget it again. A final truth, as the war continued, humanity stood not as rulers, but as companions. They did not claim empires or demand tribute. They asked only for unity, for courage, and for a chance to keep fighting until the galaxy was free. They reminded everyone of something simple but powerful. Strength is not in numbers. Strength is not in weapons. Strength is in the will to keep standing when everything says you should fall. And that was the truth of humanity. They had been forgotten. They had been reduced to a story. But now they were flesh and blood, fire and steel, courage and sacrifice. They had written themselves back into history, not with ink, but with battle. And so, as fleets moved across the stars, as soldiers raised their weapons, as the galaxy fought for freedom, one phrase echoed louder than all others. We were once only a story, but now we are the story.